What happens when your firewall gets hacked? Or when the VPN that your users log into for work gets taken over by hackers? How can you trust the security and validity of your network whenever two critical components of your network architecture are under siege? Unfortunately, some organizations are learning this right now the hard way. Zyxel is a company from Taiwan that produces a number of network architecture products. They have everything from firewalls to VPNs and other appliances. However, a couple elements of their VPN and firewall lineups are vulnerable to a really bad exploit right now. And that exploit can grant the attacker the ability to execute arbitrary code. So let's talk about the exploit itself and how it works. Let's talk about the overall threat picture and just how many systems out there in the world are being exploited and how attackers have reacted to this. We'll also talk about how you can protect yourself and your organization. And we're gonna finish with a spicy little nugget from this Rapid7 article that we are gonna be hand railing, and there's a link to this down in the description. And we're going to talk about really this very interesting issue within cybersecurity on when you roll out patches, when you disclose vulnerabilities, and really the pros and cons of that timeline itself. And we're going to talk about all of that after we talk about the sponsor for this video. It's me. I'm the video sponsor. This video is sponsored by the merch store. If you want to rep the blue team or the red team, I just put out some merch. Proceeds go to helping this channel and the content, so I really appreciate it if you're interested. But I hope that this is something that's cool, something that you kind of enjoy, so definitely check it out. There's a link down in the description. Y'all thought that I was gonna drop a Raid Shadow Legend sponsorship, didn't you? Anyway, let's talk about this exploit. This exploit is CVE-2022-30525. And yet again, we don't have a cool, flashy, or scary name for this exploit, so we're just gonna have to make do with what we've got. But this CVE has a exploit rating of 9.8 out of 10, which is pretty darn high. And the reason is this exploit allows attackers to execute arbitrary code as a user on targeted systems. And it really isn't that difficult to do. Basically, attackers can exploit a flaw in the HTTP management console of vulnerable VPN and firewall services, and they are able to basically take advantage of a misconfiguration within certain dependencies, and from there they're able to gain access to a nobody shell. That's right, a nobody shell. This is a nobody exploit. Maybe that's our name for this exploit. It's the nobody exploit. But basically this is ultimately due to unsanitized input from the attacker being passed to the back end. And this can be done both on the HTTP interface, through the browser, or it can be done via curl commands in the CLI. Now, I had no idea that nobody was actually a real user on Linux systems. And so understanding exactly what that is, nobody is a specific user that has just enough permissions to execute those routine, automated, mundane tasks on a system that you don't really want root or admin to be running, but you need a specific user to be able to run. You can kind of think of it as like a specific automation account for Linux systems or these VPN and firewall systems as well. So they're kind of like an added layer of security because again, they have just enough permissions to execute these tasks and no more. But this also means that once attackers gain access to the nobody account, they then have to escalate their own privileges. And this can actually be a good thing for defenders because this gives them more room for detection and being able to catch these attempts by the attacker to escalate their privileges. Whenever attackers are attacking a system, they have infinite room to make errors and mistakes while they're attacking a system. However, once they finally exploit and they gain a foothold, basically they have zero room for error, and they have to make sure that they are being undetected on the target system, and that really puts the blue team in the advantage to be able to set all kinds of sensors in place and place alerts and to be able to catch attackers whenever they're navigating these environments. Now, the assumption there is that the detection team is on their P's and Q's, they have the proper alerts set up, and they're really monitoring enough to be able to catch attackers in this case, which of course we've learned is not 100% the truth. Now, proof of concepts have already been published for this exploit, and in fact there's already a Metasploit console for this exploit, and so that means that it's actually very easy for attackers to utilize this exploit on targeted systems and to gain nobody shells. The simplicity of this exploit really is where the damage is done here. As far as the overall threat picture and the threat landscape, these devices have been seen in Shodan. In fact, over 16,000 of them, as Rapid7 points out, have been seen on the internet. Considering just how many of these devices are out there, and how recently this exploit was published, it really can be assumed that a lot of those are actually still vulnerable to this exploit. And attackers are certainly starting to take notice and exploit this en masse on the internet. Fortunately, from a defense perspective, Zyxel has already implemented a patch and rolled it out to customers. That patch should hopefully fix these devices from this exploit. That said, again, it is ultimately up to you and your organization to implement that patch, and that is where we reach a pretty spicy part of this story. Rapid7 wraps up this article with a section about the disclosure timeline. So pull out your teacups because we've got some nerd drama. In this section about the disclosure timeline, Rapid7 basically talks about how they wanted to roll out a unified disclosure with a target date set sometime in June. Why that far out? I'm not exactly sure personally, but I'm sure it has to do with collecting all the research and making sure that all their ducks are in a row so that way the patch and the information on the exploit all come out around the same time. They then call out Zyxel for basically breaking ranks and rolling the patch out on their own as far back as late April. They then reserve the CVE number shortly thereafter. In this article, Rapid7 digs in on why that wasn't necessarily a good decision, and their reasoning is that the patch that Zyxel rolled out could be reverse engineered by attackers and security researchers, and that would basically give them an idea on what specifically was being patched and what this vulnerability really is. And the reasoning for why that's bad, because again, security researchers are a part of that, a reason for why that's bad is because blue teams themselves aren't exactly doing that. The primary consumer for this reverse engineering research will be other attackers and not necessarily defenders. So with that, they say that this is why they themselves are releasing this article right now in mid-May and not later on in June as they had originally hoped for. Now, I understand the issue at hand here. On one hand, Zyxel wants to roll a patch out as soon as possible. They want to be able to patch now, roll the information out later, but make sure that their customers and clients have the tools at their disposal to be able to solve this problem as early as possible. On the other hand, you want to do it the right way, and you want to make sure that defenders, your primary customer for this information, have the tools at their disposal to understand exactly why they're implementing this patch and why they shouldn't procrastinate on that. And you also don't want to give attackers a head start. Different companies and organizations will come to different conclusions on this matter. It's certainly nuanced and complicated. However, they may also act, on the guidance of external factors such as the specific clients that they're working with and other security services outside the organization that help with cybersecurity and might actually have advised them to roll the patch out sooner rather than later. Personally, I don't think that Zyxel intended to do anything wrong here. I think that they came out with the right intentions. In fact, if I were in their position, I probably would have done the same thing. However, at the same time, I totally understand Rapid7's concern that ultimately this can be a problem where attackers are the only ones that are really consuming this information by reverse engineering the patch and understanding that the vulnerability exists and it is this bad. It's a 9.8 out of 10, and defenders themselves aren't exactly doing that. So really, in the end, it ends up helping the attackers and gives them a head start in exploiting this vulnerability, and defenders might be left with a patch that they don't quite know how important it is to install. After all, the patch was rolled out in April, and we're only now in mid-May having this conversation on what this exploit is. Some teams may have deliberately delayed patching their services specifically because they didn't know, how important or how critical this vulnerability was. Meanwhile, of course, attackers have known about this for a couple weeks now, and they've already started attacking. Again, there's already a Metasploit console available. I wanted to hear what you all thought about this because, again, it is a complicated and nuanced situation, and I frankly don't know everything about how the best way to handle this would be. So I put a poll out on my Twitter, and these are the results so far that you all have responded with. That said, that's what my friends on Twitter thought, but I want to know what you think. So leave a comment down below on what you think the best way to respond to this sort of an exploit or vulnerability is. Should you roll a patch out immediately and disclose information later, or should you hold all your cards and then publish it all together later down the road? Also, be sure to hit that like button so this video reaches new audiences. We want to make sure more people are interested in cybersecurity. And finally, join the Republic of Hackers Discord if you're interested in joining a very awesome and highly educated group of hackers and cybersecurity professionals that are looking to share their knowledge. There's a link to that down in the video description. And with all that, I will see you all next time. Bye.